Well, hello, and congratulations on surviving the first quarter of the circus that is 2025. And this year's not like one of those fun circuses either. No. It's like one of those horror movie circuses where a bunch of evil clowns are on the loose and in charge of the country beneath us. Anyway, March was another very slow month for real estate sales in Ottawa. And hey, I don't know about you, but I sure wouldn't want to be the guy who predicted sales volume would shoot up this year right about now. I am very bullish on sales volume for the year. Idiot. All right, but that being said, is it possible this year's slow start is really just about buyers and sellers wanting to wait until after the upcoming federal election before making a move? So am I actually stupid or just stupid like a fox? Not loving the edit so far this month. Anyways, speaking of the upcoming election, how exactly are the Liberals and Conservatives proposing to fix Canada's housing crisis if they get elected? Well, you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to tell you all about each party's housing platform and sprinkle in some of our own thoughts and a whole lot more in your April 2025 Ottawa real estate market update. Let's go! All right, so we'll get to the election stuff in the second half of the video, but as always, we're kicking things off by running you through Ottawa's Freehold and Condo sales stats for the previous month, which would be March, okay? And also, as always, we're gonna start with Freehold, all right? So let's get those March 2025 Ottawa Freehold sales stats up on the screen for you in 1, 2, 3, boom shakalaka. All right. So in March, we sold a total of 663 freehold homes in Ottawa. Now, March is typically a pretty strong month for sales here, and a total of 663 freehold sales for the entire month is weak sauce, as the kids say. If we were giving freehold a report card for March, it got a D in sales volume, right? Ouch, right? And I mean, look, when Condo comes home with a report card full of D's, it's like, whatever, you know, like you did your best, right? Like, we're just happy Condo made it home without losing his mittens or getting sprayed by a skunk or whatever. But when Freehold, like our golden child, the one we've pinned all of our hopes and dreams on, comes home with a D, it hurts. It really hurts, right? But hey, Freehold, I just want you to know, we're not mad at you. We're just disappointed. Just to give you some context that's actually useful here, 663 sales is down about 12% compared to last year's March total, and it's also the lowest number of March freehold sales we've seen in the past 9 years. Now, as I mentioned at the top, it's not unusual to see a slowdown in sales activity in the months leading up to a federal election, especially when the result of that election is still really up in the air. So you take that and then you add in all the other circus bullshit we're dealing with right now, and it's not a huge surprise to see that a lot of people at the moment are opting to take a more cautious sort of wait and see approach to making huge life and financial decisions, such as the purchase or sale of a home. Right, moving on. In spite of the D in sales volume last month, Freehold did manage to get like an A- for average sale price, which came in at a little over $796,000. Now, that's up from the $783K average we saw in February, the month that comes before March, and it's the third highest March average sale price we've ever seen. Right? It's only slightly below last year's March average of $804K, which was the second highest March average ever. Now, in case you're wondering, the highest ever March average came in 2022, and that was a whopping $920K. That's literally the highest average we've ever had in Ottawa for any month ever, okay? Wrapping up the Freehold sales stats here, our Freehold inventory levels dropped slightly in March. We started off with 2.7 months of Freehold inventory and ended March with about 2.5 months of Freehold inventory. Quick reminder, inventory is a measure that accounts for both supply and demand all in one, and that 2.5 months of inventory is within the range we'd expect in a seller's market. That being said, when we look at our other indicator stats, we see that the sales to new listings ratio at the end of March was about 49%, which is right in the middle of the range we'd expect in a balanced market. And the average time to sell for March was 34 days, which is on the low end of the range we'd expect in a balanced market. Anything below 30 days there would be an indicator of a potential seller's market. So on the whole, I characterize the freehold market as being kind of sleepy right now, if that makes sense. We're not seeing a lot of sales, but we've got low inventory, and we're also not seeing a ton of new listings, right? They're just kind of stuck in mud, right? And again, I think the looming federal election is definitely playing a role here. Post-election, I don't know if we'll see like the floodgates burst open or anything like that, but I would expect we'll see activity start to pick up once we have a better idea of who is going to be leading us for the next 4 years, and also what they intend to do about our housing crisis, right? All right, well, hope you're having fun, because we are just getting started, my friends. Now let's talk about them condos, shall we? All right, condo stats, infograph 1, 2, 3, let's get it up. That's what she said. Oh man. All right, so our condo market trended in the same general direction as freehold did this March. We sold a total of 270 condos in this beautiful city of ours, And just like it was for freehold, this year's March condo sales volume is the lowest we've seen since 2016. To give you some added context, in March of last year, that would be 2024, we sold 307 condos here, roughly 14% more than we did this year. And I'll remind you that last year was not a great year for condos either, right? Like in a typical March, we'd actually expect to see condo sales volume fall somewhere in like the mid 300s, give or take. That being said, condo selling prices remain pretty flat. All right, we're closing in on almost 3 years of seeing very little meaningful movement in the average selling price of condos in Ottawa. And what that's meant, there we go, in practical terms, is that our average sale price for condos has landed somewhere between about $410K and $455K in just about every single month since the second half of 2022. And March 2025 was no different. Condos that sold here during that span went for an average of $431K. So a big old nothing burger there as far as I'm concerned. Finally, when it comes to our indicator stats for March, we saw more or less the same trends in condos as we did for freehold. It's again, it's just this kind of sleepy market with low sales, low listing volume. Everything kind of feels a little stuck in mud right now. And that all translated to a small drop in condo inventory, which now sits at 3 months. That does technically fall within seller's market territory, but our sales to new listings ratio for condos in March was about 45.5%, and the average time to sell was 39 days, both of which fall into balanced market territory. All right. Now, I've said this before, but you always have to take these indicator stats with at least a small grain of salt, right? And whenever we find ourselves in one of these like weird periods, like the one we're living through right now, that grain of salt quickly becomes a whole teaspoon of salt, or a bag of salt, or a truck of salt. So it's hard to characterize either market, condo or freehold, with like a neat little label right now, right? Like we're seeing quite a bit of variance in sales activity and market dynamics, big words, across neighborhoods, price points, property types, etc. at the moment. All right, so the advice here, as always, for anyone who's thinking of buying or selling is to work with a professional, and preferably one who actually knows what the hell they're doing. All right? That'll do it for the condo stats. Now, let's talk politics. What could go wrong? All right, so for anyone who is not aware, Canada is about to have its 45th federal election on Monday, April 28th. Now, it's safe to say that in this upcoming federal election, housing is going to be one of the main issues, right? In fact, I think that a few months ago, you could have made a strong case that housing was going to be the main issue for this election, right? Like the headliner. But given the events of the past few months and all the things that the bad orange man and his plastic-faced crony have been up to, I think it's safe to say that Canada's housing crisis now has some steep competition for top billing in the upcoming federal election. Fair? That being said, we're all about housing here. And so we're gonna stick to what we know, and we're going to spend the next few minutes breaking down each party's housing platform for you. Now, I know, a lot of you are probably thinking, oh good, the realtor is gonna tell me who I should vote for, right? But have no fear, that's not the goal here, all right? No matter who you vote for, I'm still gonna be your friend, all right? And the honest truth is, like, no BS, I'm not even sure who I'm voting for yet. So I wouldn't know which direction to sway you even if I wanted to, all right? But what I will do is give you my thoughts on each party's housing platform, and to keep things fair, right? For each platform, I will give you both things that I like and also some things that I dislike or like question. And finally, in order to respect your time, I'm gonna stick to the Liberals and Conservatives only, all right? I'm not gonna waste anyone's precious minutes here talking about the NDP's platform, right? Which I assume involves giving everyone a free house and a puppy and paying for it with magic beans, all right? And hey, if you like the NDP, it's all good. We're just joking around here as friends, all right? All right, cool. I have good friends who vote for NDP. I love them. We're all just a bunch of happy little friends here, all right? Now let's hop to it. One thing you'll notice is that when it comes to fixing Canada's housing crisis, both the Liberals and Conservatives actually agree that the key lies in dramatically increasing the rate and the speed at which we build homes in this country. But they strongly disagree on how we should go about achieving that. You see, the Liberals' platform proposes we get there by increasing the government's level of direct involvement in home building initiatives, whereas the Conservatives believe that the answer is to reduce the amount of government involvement, or red tape as they call it. All right, so now that we've laid that out for you at a high level, let's talk about the actual promises that each party is making, their plans, and tell you what we think. And then we'll start with the Liberals. All right, so the Liberals are promising to increase our rate of residential construction in Canada to 500,000 homes per year over the course of the next decade. All right, now that would be more than double what it is today, by the way. And here is how they propose to do that. First, the Liberals would create a new federal agency called Build Canada Homes, right, or BCH. This new federal agency would, and I quote, get the federal government back in the business of building homes. Right? So this new government agency, BCH, would be directly responsible for building a large quantity of affordable, government-owned housing on public lands. BCH would also run a $25 billion financing program that would be aimed at supporting the building of modular or prefabricated homes. Right? So the idea here being that these prefab homes are faster and less expensive to build than traditional homes, which are built on site. Third, BCH would also provide an additional $10 billion in low-cost loans for affordable and deeply affordable supporting housing initiatives. So like senior housing, housing for the homeless, First Nations housing, and things of that nature. You got all that? Good, but there's more. In addition to creating the Build Canada Homes Agency, or BCH as I like to call it, the Liberals would also eliminate the GST on new home purchases of under $1 million for all first-time home buyers. They would also bring back a program from the 1970s called the MURB program. That's MURB, which stands for Multi-Unit Residential Building, and that's a program that offers some pretty serious tax incentives to investors and developers who build new rental housing. Next, we've got 3 more to go. The Liberals also say they would work with municipalities to cut development charges in half by providing those municipalities with infrastructure support. Also, the Liberals promise to make investments in skilled trades and construction innovation, such as increasing the development and adoption of low carbon building materials. And last but certainly not least, I almost made it, they also say they'll work with the provinces and cities in order to reduce red tape so that we can simplify and streamline the home building and permitting process. Woo! All right, so that is the Liberals' plan in a nutshell. There's actually more in there, but I think I've covered all the main points here. Okay, so what do we like and what do we question about all of this? Well, first, we'll start with the positive. I really like the focus on affordable housing. I think that's super important. All right, and I love the idea of investing in construction innovation and in greener building materials and initiatives that happen to, help the planet, right? Like I happen to like this planet and I'd love for it to, just kind of keep on spinning for a long time to come. Right? So I'm all for that. And finally, I'm also very intrigued by the idea of really scaling up the production of prefab housing. I think that could have like a real impact if it's done properly. So those are the things I like about the Liberals' housing platform. Now here's where I have concerns. So first off, you can't tell me with a straight face that you want to slash red tape and then that the way you hope to achieve that is to create a new government agency that's going to get back in the business of building housing. Those two things do not jive. And hey, did they ever stop to ask why the government got out of the business of building housing in the first place? Be honest, when you hear the term government housing, what sort of images come to mind? Right? I bet they're not images of like beautiful, well-managed properties, right? In the last year, I've personally had to renew my passport and change my address on file with CRA. And let me tell you, it's a shit show, right? I still don't have a passport. I think I've just resigned myself to the idea that I'm just never going to travel again at this point. So yeah, I have very little faith that putting a government agency in charge of building and managing large-scale development will lead to cost savings and increased efficiencies. Last I checked, building a building or a subdivision was a little harder than renewing a passport, so maybe we should get the passport thing, right, or the changing your address thing before we start building cities, right? So yeah, cost savings, increased efficiencies. I'd have to bet on the exact opposite thing happening here if we kind of put the government in charge of that. And finally, one other concern I have with the Liberals' plan is it does include a lot of new spending, like $36 billion of new spending, and actually even more than that if you read through the whole thing. And so like they don't really tell us where they're going to get the money for like this new agency and all these initiatives, but I think we all know. So that's the Liberals, all right? And again, I want to be clear, there are things I really like about this plan. There are things that I question. But now let's talk about the Conservatives, shall we? Just to set the tone for you here, both parties, Conservatives and Liberals, published summaries of their housing plans on their website, right? And in each summary is about 2 pages long, give or take. And in true Conservative fashion, the first 1.5 pages of their 2-page plan is just them shitting on the Liberals. They don't say anything about what they're gonna do, but they go on at length about how bad the Liberals are, all right? Once you get past all the axe the tax and shed the red and shiv the libs or whatever other cheesy verb the noun slogans they have in there, you eventually stumble onto like an actual plan, right? And that plan is heavily focused on eliminating a lot of the bureaucracy around home building, all right? Which the Conservatives say is responsible for the slowing production and rising cost of new housing supply, right? So if we want to look at the Liberals' plan as kind of like, like dangling a carrot, the Conservatives' plan is really more like swinging a stick, right? They aren't proposing any new programs or government subsidies, the Conservatives are. Instead, they are primarily focused on pushing municipalities to remove the barriers that prevent housing from being built fast and affordably, and then punishing those municipalities that fail to do so. All right? So some of the specific actions that the Conservatives intend to take in order to make housing more affordable are that, 1, they will mandate a minimum 15% annual increase in the production rate of new housing supply for all major cities. And any major city that fails to meet that target would have its federal funding clawed back, okay? Whereas cities that exceed their targets would be rewarded with a federal building bonus. And 2, in that same vein, the Conservatives would also look to streamline the building application and approval process. And they do that by penalizing municipal gatekeepers. Those are their words. So these are the people that delay developments, and then they would reward the municipalities that cut development charges and expedite permits. Next, the Conservatives also promised that within the first 18 months of taking office, they'd sell about 15% of the federal government's buildings and land for the express purpose of residential housing development. Also, the Conservatives promised they'd eliminate the GST on all new homes priced under $1.3 million. So that's whether you're a first-time buyer or not. Okay, first-time buyers, investors, no one pays GST on a new home under $1.3 million. Whew, catching my breath. The Conservatives would also make significant investments towards greatly increasing the number of skilled tradespeople we have in Canada. They've set a target of like 350,000 new skilled tradespeople. And finally, this is the one that I personally find the most intriguing, the Conservatives would allow capital gains tax to be deferred so long as the money is reinvested in Canada. So in practical terms, right, give you an example, this would allow a real estate investor, for example, to sell off some of their smaller single-family assets like townhouses and condos in order to develop or acquire larger multifamily assets without having to pay capital gains right away. They'll eventually have to pay it when they cash out, but not on the transition, all right? So that is the Conservatives' housing platform in a nutshell, okay? Now, what do we like and what do we question? Well, first off, I love the capital gains deferral. I can tell you from experience that I work with a lot of investors who I know for a fact would love to sell some of their smaller assets in order to get into larger ones, right? But they avoid doing so because when we look at the numbers, the math just doesn't work when you consider that a large chunk of the capital you need for that larger project just gets taxed away on the transition. And so I think this type of policy would, or could anyways, organically bring more supply to market and also encourage new development. So like, I'm a big fan of that one, all right? I also really like the idea of cutting down on all of the bureaucracy, the kind of NIMBYism that slows development across major cities. I think we're long overdue for some change there, okay? And finally, I also think it makes a lot of sense to just leave the actual home building to the pros rather than having the government try to like roll up its sleeves and step in and play hero, all right? Now, that all being said, I do have some critiques for the Conservatives' approach. I'm about to pan their plan, as they would probably say. So first off, it's a little heavy-handed, right? It's a little heavy-handed. It's a little much, Pierre, right? Calm down. I've got a collaborative nature, and so while I agree that like some serious reform to the way municipalities apply development fees and award permits is needed, I don't think strong-arming them like right out of the gate is gonna get you the best result here. I think you're just gonna create a lot of these kind of pissing contests with cities and no one wins there. I also think imposing blanket requirements that all major cities must increase their annual development rate by 15% or else it is far too black and white. It's a really reductive approach, especially when you're tying it to whether or not a city receives federal funding, right? It's an approach that fails to consider the fact that building in, say, Vancouver is not the same as building in Winnipeg or in Ottawa or in Moncton or wherever else, right? These major cities all have different population sizes, different land availability, local economies, housing costs, housing demand, access to materials, labor, skilled trades, just to name a few, right? So I think a more nuanced approach here that accounts for these differences is needed. Otherwise, I honestly think you're just gonna end up with a bunch of cities looking for ways to like game the system, right? And finally, just a quick one to finish this off. While I like the idea of removing barriers in order to allow developers to create housing supply faster and with less overhead costs, it is still worth mentioning that making it cost less doesn't guarantee a developer will charge less, right? And allowing them to build faster doesn't guarantee they'll build more, right? Like for-profit companies will always charge as much as the market's willing to bear for their product. That's just the way it works. And also, as demand starts to level off, those same companies will typically slow their production rates, right? So there's no perfect solution here by any means, but then again, there never is there, right? So yeah, anyways, those are my thoughts. And I still don't know who I'm voting for. right? But what I do know is that if I was looking to buy or sell a home in Ottawa, I'd call this number right here or email the address just below it. I don't know where Andrew's gonna put it on the screen. And I'd set up a discovery call with someone from the Papineau group. We are always happy to chat, see how we might be able to help. And that will do it for this month, everyone. Thanks for watching. As always, remember to go out and vote on April 28th. I'm Serge Papineau, and I'll see you next month.